I want to verify that he was feeling frustrated, and he was feeling pressured, and he was feeling like his character was being assassinated by people publicly and privately who are, I guess, consider themselves more pro-Israel than Charlie. And he refused to back off of his criticisms and said the truth.
Megyn Kelly has confirmed the massive pro-Israel pressure campaign against Charlie Kirk in his last days, and in this clip corroborates many of the things that you've heard from Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and what they've said about this in the previous days. She gets into what implications this has for U.S.-Israeli relations. Was Charlie Kirk changing his mind on Israel? And what are we to take from this, especially when many people are blaming Israel for involvement in his death? So let's get her take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
There was a meeting at Bill Ackman's Hamptons home. Charlie was there, so were some other so-called influencers. And Candace suggests that at that meeting, Bill Ackman pressured Charlie, he was very supportive of Israel. Do not get me wrong. I mean, I know, I spoke with Charlie directly about this, but he was starting to have the same doubts, questions about whether this could continue without Israel losing all of its support in the world, as I was. And he and I had a long talk about our frustration at being dubbed anti-Zionist or anti-Israel or anti-Semites even, just for those very mild criticisms. I mean, my God, it was fucked up, okay? It really was. And he was frustrated by that, and so was I. Now, Candace had a different characterization of that meeting than the one you're going to hear from Bill Ackman.
Yeah, she certainly did, and this is corroborated in Max Blumenthal's article where he talks about Charlie Kirk's concern that he felt threatened by the backlash. This according to an unnamed source that talks to Max Blumenthal, an unnamed very close friend of Charlie Kirk's. This corroborates what Megyn Kelly is saying there, and that does seem to be, the impression that we get from the receipts of the people involved in this thing. The Bill Ackman camp not really giving receipts to refute this in any possible way. Bill Ackman did have a 1,000-word post on his Twitter about this, but, we have several people aligning on this when people initially called Candace Owens a total kook for saying that.
And hers dovetails with this reporter, Max Blumenthal, who also reported on the meeting. Here is what she said, again, in part, in SOT 4, where she said, they had this meeting, and she suggested that meeting with Bibi occurred while Charlie was at that meeting at Bill Ackman's house in the Hamptons.
A couple of weeks ago, before Charlie lost his life, Charlie was in the Hamptons, and he had more than one event, but he had essentially what was staged, an intervention was staged by Bill Ackman. Because Charlie's rational thoughts about Israel were a no-no. This is not the route that you should be going on. And Charlie was surrounded by his friends, his quote-unquote friends. Bill Ackman was very upset, and threats were made. It was at this time that Bibi Netanyahu was called, and Charlie was invited to Israel. This was an under duress situation, I would say. And I know that Charlie was offered a ton of money in this moment. A ton of money. Bibi would fund it, spend tons of money. And Turning Point, I guess, if it needed to go to a higher level, would have gone to an even higher level than it already was at. And I know for a fact that Charlie denied that funding, that Charlie denied, and what Bibi didn't include there, he declined to go to Israel.
Yeah, and to be clear,
okay.
Netanyahu actually said that, in some video interviews since this, that, unfortunately that meeting will never take place. Of course, not mentioning that it sounds like Charlie Kirk declined to go to Israel. Now, who knows why the motivations? It could be because he was sick of the pressure. He came to view Netanyahu as a bully, as Max Blumenthal's article says that he did, with several people believing that and repeating that, including Tucker Carlson live on his homage to Charlie Kirk. It could have been timing, whatever. That was left out of Bibi Netanyahu's narrative about this.
Here's more. This Max Blumenthal reporting. He writes for his own outlet called Gray Zone. He used to work for the Daily Beast. The Nation Media Matters, which explains why in his reporting he referred to me as an anti-Zionist. Wrong, Max. I'm totally a Zionist. I completely believe in Israel's right to exist, and I've defended their right to defend themselves after the disgusting, horrendous terrorist attack on them.
Okay, this is completely incorrect. Max's piece does no such thing. I think I know the reason that she's saying that. If you look at the piece here, I have the Gray Zone article that Max wrote in front of me. In the sentence I believe she's talking about, and I've searched this article to make sure this is the only instance of using the word anti-Zionist, and I think it's the only time where her name comes up. He's not claiming that Megyn Kelly is an anti-Zionist. He's saying, talking about the Turning Point USA event where Tucker Carlson spoke and said that Epstein was a Mossad agent. I can show you that clip later, or likely working for Mossad, most likely. This is the sentence. They are speakers from former Fox News stalwarts Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly to the anti-Zionist Jewish comedian Dave Smith denounced Israel's blood-soaked assault on the besieged Gaza Strip, etc. It goes on from there. So you can see he's not calling Megyn Kelly an anti-Zionist. He's calling Dave Smith an anti-Zionist, which is a term that Dave Smith doesn't, run from, by the way. Not Megyn Kelly. So I think that there's a plausible case here where she was reading this article quick and thought that attribution was to her. I guess it's in close proximity to her name in the article here. But at the same time, it's just not true to say Max Blumenthal called her an anti-Zionist. And you can verify that in the article.
2023, so get it straight. But in any event, he too reported that the Ackman outing was an intervention he used, during which sources say he and others hammered Charlie, that Charlie came away fretting about Israeli blackmail. He says he's spoken to 5 people with intimate knowledge of Kirk's meeting, and that he alleged that Ackman personally confronted Kirk about his views on Israel. An unknown British woman joined in the argument and began screaming at Charlie. When his host presented him with a detailed list of every offense he supposedly committed against Israel, Charlie was horrified, said one person. Ackman also allegedly demanded that Kirk rescind his invitation for Tucker Carlson to speak at his upcoming America Fest 2025 in December.
And Tucker Carlson has corroborated that, saying that Charlie Kirk, despite wanting to have Tucker Carlson speak again after this speech that was so controversial, and we'll play a clip from that in a little bit, that Charlie Kirk had lost a $2 million donation for holding the line on having Tucker Carlson to come back in December and speak again, knowing that Tucker Carlson doesn't exactly have the same views on Israel as Ben Shapiro, as Bill Ackman would have him have, as Seth Dillon would want him to have, and that's something that Tucker said in that homage video too.
Ackman, he came under fire too because he had tweeted out recently, "I feel incredibly privileged to have spent a day and shared a meal with Charlie Kirk in this summer. He was a giant of a man." And once again, Candace and others suggesting that that's not the whole story, because if he really was threatening Charlie, that's a weird tweet, an incomplete tweet. Now, Bill Ackman responds, as only Bill Ackman can. We'd be here for another 3 hours if I read you his whole response. As you guys know, the Ackman tweets are just legendary for their 49 paragraphs minimum.
Yeah, his tweet was longer than War and Peace by Tolstoy, by the way. I can confirm that, beyond a shadow of doubt.
But this one deserved a bit of a response because he's being accused of something pretty vile. And he described these accounts as totally false. I think I can easily put this to bed. He promised, "I have receipts," as they say. He did not abide when asked to provide the so-called receipts, reports Max Blumenthal. But Ackman did go on X and said, "I've been slandered by Candace Owens." She'll be responding, I'm sure, shortly, of staging an intervention with Charlie in which threats were made. He says it's not true. At no time have I ever threatened Charlie, Turning Point, or anyone associated with him. I've never blackmailed anyone, let alone Charlie. I've never offered Charlie or Turning Point any money in an attempt to influence them. I connected with Charlie when he had DM'd me in late May of this year and expressed interest in meeting me. On the Zoom, he explained to me that conservatives, in particular young ones, were getting tired of defending Israel, and this was very concerning to him. He suggested, Bill Ackman says, Charlie, that recruiting a group of junior Charlie Kirks who could host open mic sessions on college campuses would be an effective way to encourage debate on a host of issues, an approach he believed to be worthy of consideration and better enable students to get to the truth.
So you can see why Charlie Kirk was in such a pressure-inducing situation. He was in the middle, kind of trapped in the middle between this rich donor Zionist class like Bill Ackman, like Seth Dillon, and the on-the-ground activists that are turning away from Israel. And that's a dynamic that's butting each other in the head so many times. And that's the unique thing I think some people are missing from this story, is that unlike people like Tucker and Candace, he didn't have those rich donors and then the added dynamic of the activists that, you know, all basic kind of polls show are turning against Israel, far more at least so than their parents are. And that is why he was kind of forced as a rock in a hard place. He was in a place where he had to walk a tightrope, and that wasn't easy. And that explains, I think, a lot of what's happened in this situation.
I was interested in learning more. We scheduled a series of conference calls between Turning Point staff members and members of my team. And then we assembled this diverse group of influencers for a 1.5-day session. We chose the afternoon of August 4th to the afternoon of August 5th for the convening. Charlie and members of my team worked to put together.
By the way, 2 days after that, he went on Megyn Kelly's show expressing his frustrations about his character being called into question. I'm not sure if she's going to play that clip, but that's what happened. Look at Megyn Kelly's show with Charlie Kirk, August 6th, and the frustration and anger that's coming out of the screen as he talks about the fact that, you know, despite his long track record for supporting Israel, his integrity and character were being questioned unfairly so. Same with Megyn Kelly. The two really bonded over this moment in that podcast.
I offered to host the sessions so that I could attend some. Charlie sent out the invitations. About 35 or so influencers accepted. Charlie and Turning Point put together the agenda. Some were critical of Israel. Some were supportive. At the end, I sat with Charlie and members of my team. We discussed the events of the evening. Charlie believed he had identified a number of potential Turning Point ambassadors who could launch open mic events on campus and would then follow up with them. We agreed to keep in touch thereafter. We corresponded by text over the next few weeks. This was not an intervention to blackmail Charlie into adopting certain views on Israel. It was nothing of the sort. Candace did respond in part on X last night, saying, I know feigning victimhood is kind of an Israeli brand thing, but I was clear that Charlie felt blackmailed by the offer to fund TPUSA, which he refused, meaning from Netanyahu, I think she means here. No one said Bill Ackman blackmailed Charlie. Try to resist the urge to rewrite history. And she goes on saying people in attendance did characterize it as an intervention.
And think about that. This is how they treat people that, you know, just take one step behind the line of complete zealous Zionism and Israel first, and that mentality in U.S. politics, deferring to Israel on everything from foreign policy to allowing the hate speech codes that they want to impose in the United States to do away with anything that they declare as anti-Semitism. And by the way, they've routinely said that if you criticize Israel, that alone is anti-Semitism. And that's not just a rumor. They've called Jews that are critics of Israel anti-Semites. They say that about Norm Finkelstein and Jeff Sachs and Dave Smith and Aaron Mate and Max Blumenthal. But look at this. If you don't think that there's something to this story about what was said at that Turning Point event, take a look at this. This is what Tucker Carlson said at that event that seems to have ruffled a lot of feathers. We're going to listen.
Not acceptable. And I think the real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of Intel Services, probably not American. And we have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? How does a guy go from being a math teacher at the Dalton School in the late 70s with no college degree to having multiple airplanes, a private island, and the largest residential house in Manhattan? Where did all the money come from? And no one has ever gotten to the bottom of that because no one has ever tried. And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into
the applause,
thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying that. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that. I've spent my entire life pretty much in Washington, where I knew and loved a number of people, including one very close person who worked at CIA. That has never prohibited me from saying, I think the CIA has done some horrible things, murdered.
Yeah, he's gone beyond that. He's called for the abolishment of the CIA. But you can see why Zionists the most fierce and devout ones, the most rich ones that want to throw their weight around and influence the world, do not like what this guy is saying right now. And it's beyond that. He also goes on in the speech to criticize Bill Ackman himself, multi-million-dollar donor to Turning Point USA. He personally owns like something like $8 billion. That's his net worth. But Tucker also said it's not anti-Semitic to criticize Israel, and we should criticize Israel when it's wrong, when our interests are entangled in this foreign country over our own country. And Dave Smith debated Josh Hammer there too. This really ruffled feathers. Let's get back into it.
Here is where I'm going with it. Oh, and by the way, I should mention, this is important. Andrew Colvett, who is Charlie's right-hand man at Turning Point, we know him well, wrote the following. I've been asked about this weekend event with Bill Ackman more than a few times now, so I asked our staff who were traveling with Charlie to find out what's true. His team was with him 100% of the time when he was not in his hotel room. Here's what they told me. Bill never yelled at Charlie, never pressed him on BB, never gave him a list of Charlie's offenses against Israel. There was concern raised about having Tucker at the Student Action Summit. We don't believe this came from Bill. And Charlie's reply was, honestly, people telling me not to have Tucker makes me want to have Tucker. And I am going to lock him in for AmFest too.
Well, that shows character right there. I mean, whatever you think about Charlie Kirk, I wasn't a fan of how pro-Israel he was. That shows courage when people of high power are coming down on him over this. Whether it was Ackman or not, it seems like it was Ackman, by the way, or at least Ackman was one of them. For him to respond that way is the perfect response.
Charlie personally told me, says Andrew, he had a very cordial relationship with Bill and the event was productive. Those are the facts. Well, here is the reason I am weighing in. I wasn't there and I don't know what happened. But the day Charlie was done with that summit at Ackman's house, he came on my show. It was his last appearance on the Megyn Kelly show on August 6th. And I asked him about his evolving views on Israel and about the criticism we both had come under for, honestly, like the most milquetoast criticisms of Israel. It was just crazy. I don't think Charlie actually even really did criticize Israel. I think he just hosted his Turning Point event in July in which he had tons of pro-Israel people, tons, but also Dave Smith was there, who's a critic, and Tucker was there, who's become a bit of a critic. And he got so much shit for this. And Charlie was really frustrated by this and annoyed because no young person, no person under 30 in America supports Israel. They just don't. Look at the polls. It doesn't matter whether you're conservative or not, like virtually none of them. And that was Charlie's constituency. And Charlie was hearing from those people that they were not into this and they really weren't into our support for the war in Iran and bombing Iran and all that. And he was trying to find a way of bringing that to President Trump and bringing that to his donors and to everybody else to say, hey, you might be losing some support here. I said the same, and both of us got treated like we are Mehdi Hassan.
That is so true, and this is what Blumenthal's piece said from his unnamed friend. He was frightened by the backlash he got from these things, for going to Trump and pleading Trump not to bomb Iran. Don't follow these neocon stooges that had led us astray. He even tweeted some things like that around the time that was happening. I think mid-June was when that was happening. But this is according to the piece. You hear Megyn Kelly corroborating this, Tucker Carlson corroborating this, Candace Owens corroborating this. And by the way, Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson don't have the same views toward Israel as Megyn Kelly. But they all agree on this. They all agree he was feeling that pressure. And like I said, it leaps out of the screen in that interview that she had with him.
And we were annoyed. We were both annoyed by that. So we had the conversation. I did not tell Charlie we were going to discuss it. Usually when guests are coming on the show, we'll give them a heads up, like in case they want to study up on something, whatever. Like these are probably generally the 8 to 10 topics we're going to hit. And we did not give him heads up on this because I didn't even tell my team on it. I just decided to do it. And here is a chunk of how that went. And something's happening, though, with this whole debate that is really bothering me. And I wonder if you're feeling it, too. My contention here is that some in the pro-Israel camp are so knee-jerk about calling you anti-Semitic or getting deeply offended if you say anything that doesn't align with their narrative, that it undermines their own cause. And I have to tell you, I find it very irritating.
I'm so glad you brought this up, and I would second that. Megyn, I think I have a bulletproof resume showing my defense of Israel, both on campus, on social media, to great, let's just say mockery and scorn at times because I believe it, right? I believe in the scriptural land rights given to Israel. I believe in fulfillment of prophecy. And again, I'm not a theologian, but I'm a Christian. My life was changed in Israel. The spiritual energy is so amazing there. I want them to win. I've said that repeatedly.
Same.
And however, Megyn, you're hitting on something very potent and important. Now, let me first say, I don't want to judge an entire group because there's been many people in the pro-Israel world that have been very sweet, very kind, very nuanced, very Charlie, you're with us. You don't have to agree all the time. However, and I will say this, the behavior by a lot, both privately and publicly, are pushing people like you and me away. Not like we're going to be pro-Hamas, not like we're going to, but we're like, honestly, the way you are treating me is so repulsive. I have text messages, Megyn, calling me an anti-Semite. I am learning biblical Hebrew and writing a book on the Shabbat. I honor the Shabbat, literally the Jewish Sabbath. I visit Israel and fight for it.
It's very irritating.
It's
been
almost
so
as if
unfair.
you,
they were coming after you after a turning point for, among other things, that you had Dave Smith there. Dave Smith is allowed to criticize Israel. You had both sides. The Israeli side was overrepresented.
Though. No, you're not allowed to. It's even worse than that. Again, I just want to repeat for the fifth time. I love Israel. I want Israel to win. But my moral character is now being put into question, Megyn. Not my decisions. Not like, hey, are you doing this? Is it smart or is it dumb? But no, I am a bad person.
Yeah, this is true. Look at this. This comes out in tweets like from Laura Loomer here while this was taking place on July 13, calling Charlie Kirk a charlatan, claiming to be pro-Trump one day while he stabs Trump in the back the next, complaining specifically about this event, including Dave Smith. And then he just had that intervention, the intervention that is likened to, someone falling off the wagon, which these Zionists seem to have believed that Charlie Kirk was. And that's why they staged this intervention. Just think about that. They treat this like alcoholism, right? That's what's coming through in his words here. He was getting threats. He was, being mocked and ridiculed by the most fierce pro-Zionist loyalists like Laura Loomer, as well as his own donors. That is the case.
If I do this. And I could go, you saw it, Megyn. It was trending on Twitter, thousands of tweets and text messages. And if I were to be charitable and generous, I will say, the people that are attacking me are in a hyper-paranoid state because they're at war, and war tends to make things black and white, and you're a hammer looking for a nail. So I'm trying to be charitable, Megyn. Literally, I'm trying to cut as much slack as I can, right? Like, okay, what would it be like if all of a sudden I'm starting to see a pattern of behavior similar to what my grandparents saw in 1930s Germany online? How would I behave? So that's like my charitable kind of overcompensation spirit.
And he was, if you look at some of his tweets from this time, even the time frame in which a lot of people have said that he really turned against Israel, he was doubling down on the pro-Israel propaganda. Here's a video where he questions the starvation in Gaza, not even questions it, saying it's a lie that's being told, that we shouldn't trust the pictures coming out of Gaza. And by the way, they discussed this topic on this Megyn Kelly interview, so I don't want to make this a totally selective narrative that he was so upset about Israel and Israeli influence in our politics and pressure from the Israel lobby and his donors against him. He was doubling down on some pro-Israel propaganda. Here's one from July 28th, just before he recorded this. Here we go. Let's just watch the very beginning.
I hate being lied to, and I hate being propagandized. And this weekend, there was an all-out propaganda campaign trying to make it seem as if Israel is intentionally starving the people of Gaza. I hate being lied to, especially by the media networks. They lied to us about COVID. They lied to us about the vaccines. They lied to us about open borders. They lied to us Hunter Biden laptop. Joining us now.
Anyways, he has a guest to discuss this, but that's what the topic of this is, talking to a rabbi about this. He also made a lot of, had a lot of statements that, this isn't a genocide in Gaza. He never made anything that was considered adversarial toward Netanyahu. Really, it seems like in terms of his tweets that I have seen, maybe that's true. If you have something, let me know down below, but let's continue.
At the same time, I'm like, but it's not defensible to be dumb, right?
Yeah.
So,
and it's offensive. It's offensive to those of us who have been out there defending them in many instances against critics on our own side. And now you have a couple of comments like, well, what about this? Well, has it gone on too long? Like, is it time to wrap it up? And the thing about Epstein is just so bizarre. I don't know who he was an agent for. It might have been Israel or an asset, or it might have been nobody. Yeah. But we're allowed to speculate about that. It's there's some rule.
You're not allowed to speculate about that when it comes to the Zionist lobby. That's off limits. That's not on the 3x5 index card of allowable opinion, as my good friend Tom Woods calls it. It's not acceptable to these people.
Well, you can't go there when it comes to Israel.
Well, you and I believe that we're Americans and Americans first, period. End of story. We are saying.
I want to verify that he was feeling frustrated and he was feeling pressured and he was feeling like his character was being assassinated by people publicly and privately who are, I guess, consider themselves more pro-Israel than Charlie. And he refused to back off of his criticisms and said the truth.
Yeah, that is corroborating what Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson have said about this, and that so many of the Zionist forces, the pro-Israel forces, the Ben Shapiros of the world, the Bill Ackmans of the world, have said is a complete lie. But they haven't produced the receipts. Those who are, telling the truth have provided receipts. They have shared, in some cases, personal text messages about this. I think Ackman actually shared a few text messages without much context or anything like that yesterday. But before that, the pro-Zionist forces were saying, well, this is totally immoral. You're going to share your friend's personal text messages. Well, I think it's pretty immoral to steal his legacy and try to pretend like he was Ben Shapiro and not somewhere in between Ben Shapiro and Dave Smith on this, that he wasn't probably wrestling with this issue in some way, questioning some of the things that come from this. You see that in this interview here. Does that constitute a turn against Israel? To me, it doesn't, man. I've looked through so much of his content in this time frame, and he still doubles down on defending Israel. He doubles down the policy in Gaza, which is wretched and vile, if you ask me. But he didn't turn on Israel. He was starting to question some things and have some minor criticisms. But that is being portrayed as if it's a need for an intervention. This intervention that happened in the Hamptons, that made him feel frightened. That was what his unnamed friend said to Max Blumenthal. That's what several of people of prominence around him have said. So I'm glad that Megyn Kelly has weighed into this. Definitely don't agree with Megyn Kelly on Israel, but I think she's telling the truth on this. I have no reason to doubt she's telling the truth. It's reflected in that interview she had with him on August 6th, right after his meeting, this intervention meeting. It's consistent with what Tucker Carlson said. It's in alignment with what Dave Smith has said and Candace Owens has said. So that's what we have. But let me know down below, what do you think about this? Was Charlie really turning against Israel? Was he feeling threatened? Do you agree in any way with the people who are trying to argue against this narrative? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Megyn Kelly. Thanks for this interview, Megyn. Despite our differences, I think that you're being truthful in this. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, it'd mean the world to me. You can help support my channel. And in return for that, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube, the ones that are members only right now. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.